Years of experience investing directly at the security level and indirectly. This is sort of our business section of the afternoon. As an asset allocator in traditional and alternative assets, he is the Chief Investment Officer and a Senior Managing Director of Move 37 and Protege Partners. His portfolio management experience includes Soros Fund Management, LLC, Credit Suisse First Boston, and Financial Risk Management. Michael is a board member of AIMA, on the Management Advisory Council for the Michael Price Student Investment Fund, chair of value investing at CFANY, where he has received multiple awards, and a member of the Economic Club of New York. He's a published author, has been interviewed for top financial newspapers, and is a keynote speaker at conferences and universities. Michael received an MBA from Columbia Business School, where he is now also an adjunct professor of finance and economics, and a BS in economics from New York University. Please welcome Michael.
I'm Mike Weinberg, Chief Investment Officer for Move 37 and adjunct professor at Columbia Business School. It's an honor for me to speak at the Frick, one of my favorite museums, not only in the city, but in the world. Actually, I flew back from vacation with my family last night for the day to speak here, and we'll fly back tonight. I didn't know the video option was available. That would have been a lot easier. In any case, it was only Florida, so it's not as Stephen suggested, Hawaii. So today I'll lecture on optimizing computer vision for autonomous learning investment strategies, or the acronym ALICE for short, pronounced Alice. Slide one. Oh, that's me. What Alice? Why now? For those that may not yet be familiar with what it is, let me expound. ALICE is an investment strategy resulting from the confluence of 5 factors. 1, the exponential growth of data. 2, data science. 3, machine learning working. It hasn't always. 4, low-cost, on-demand cloud storage and processing. And 5, old ways of gaining an information edge pose significant risks. These 5 factors have recently coalesced to enable ALICE. 1, the exponential growth of data. By show of hands, so in this room now, how many of you knew that data is growing at the rate of Moore's Law, doubling roughly every 18 to 24 months? Okay, so some of you. Minority, though. So it is. 2, data science. It's a relatively new field, and all of this unstructured non-financial data that's growing at the rate of Moore's Law needs to be normalized, classified, parsed, and organized. 3, machine learning was invented nearly 70 years ago, post-World War II, by Arthur Samuel. Over the decades, it's had various periods of overhype and resultant disappointment and disenchantment. I'm sure some of you in this room are aware of that. There were various reasons for this, including lack of sufficient data and expensive processing and storage. Though as investors, we rarely, if ever, believe or say, it's different this time, we do believe it's different this time. Look at the accomplishments by AlphaGo and GoZero in Go. These are ancient board games, wildly popular in Asia. 2 decades ago, for example, a world's leading scientist in Princeton thought it would be 100 years before a computer could beat the human world champions in Go. Go has 10 to the 700 permutations, more permutations than there are atoms in the universe. 14 years after that prognostication, and in only 6 years, with machine learning and artificial intelligence, humans were eclipsed by man and woman plus machine. Later on in this symposium, there will be a discussion on creativity in AI, which we look forward to hearing, as obviously we just had one as well. That said, we would argue that moves, such as the 37th move of AlphaGo versus Lee Sedol, that had never been codified in thousands of years of Go playing, were the equivalent of creative, if not actually creative. Coincidentally, in chess, there was also a pivotal move in Deep Blue versus Garry Kasparov on the 37th move. MOV in assembly language means replace the old with the new. We believe on the 37th move, the old paradigm of people beating machines was replaced by people plus machine beating people. Point 4, low-cost, on-demand cloud storage and processing power. What cost $1 million to compute in 1980 costs 4 cents today. This, along with data science and machine learning working, are why we do believe it's different this time. Point 5, the information edge is a risk. In a world where investors who seek to gain an information edge from companies are penalized with fines and prison, this lends itself to the use of anonymized public data for investing. For context, we believe an analog to Alice is Uber. Uber was a confluence of 3 factors: GPS, global positioning systems, cellular Wi-Fi networks and cell phones, and the internet. Uber disrupted the taxi limousine industry to the point that New York City taxi medallions are down 80% from their peak value. We believe Alice will similarly disrupt investment management. Alice are fully systematic, run by PhDs, like the people who spoke before me at this conference, and may invest fundamentally or technically. Alice managers generally need to be PhDs to deal with the complexity of the machine learning data in data science. Investing based on 2-dimensional data, such as traditional financial data, is complex enough. However, investing based on 3-dimensional data, such as computer vision, is even more complex and generally beyond an MBA's abilities. PhDs in machine learning, data visualization, robotics, epidemiology, statistics, computer science, electrical engineering, and physics are a few of the disciplines top Alice managers have studied. Slide 2. How can we use these techniques? At its heart, Alice is about pattern recognition. These patterns may be based on technical data, such as price volume, on fundamental data, such as balance sheet and income statement data, unstructured and structured financial, or non-financial data are all potential inputs. Data visualization, computer vision, and commensurate Alice investing based on that is relatively new. As we discussed in the first slide, it's this confluence of factors over the past few years that's enabled it. This slide is a brief overview of 5 types of data visualization or computer vision that may be used by Alice managers to achieve excess returns in alpha. The examples we will cite in this symposium are tracking commodities, understanding retail trends, analyzing weather patterns, interpreting real-time sports games in the betting markets, and identifying the heart rate of CEOs from videos. As one of my colleagues pointed out, that can also be used for world leaders. Each of these techniques has a prior analog that literally, and pun intended, was analog, and now, through computer vision, these techniques are digitally employed via computer vision. Oil. How full are the tanks? Slide 3. Earlier in my career, I was a portfolio manager at Soros Fund Management. I worked with a legendary portfolio manager who decades ago was known to employ people in the Middle East to monitor and quantify the level of oil tanks, count oil tankers, and track their movements. This would be reported back by telephone and/or fax machine. Quaint now, right? Because at that time, email, the World Wide Web, and the internet were primarily, if not exclusively, used by DARPA, CERN, and select academic institutions. This was all based on public information, and anyone could have had people do the same thing, though very few people thought of it and/or went through the time, trouble, and related expenditure. To paraphrase Warren Buffett with my own vernacular, just as anyone can pick up a bat and theoretically hit like a professional baseball player, most don't for various reasons. It was part of this portfolio manager's mosaic theory, the one that I worked with, in determining the outlook for crude and related securities compared to the market view. Not inappropriately, To use another term from the analog age, if one fast forwards to today, we have this slide in front of you. Through the internet, democratization and commoditization of information, anyone in the world can now go to this tanker tracking site and monitor daily crude shipments, supplies, and storage levels. The ratio of the length of the shadow inside the tank, the ratio of the shadows inside the tank, or the tanks, I should say, versus the length of the shadow outside of the tank, or tanks, indicate how full they are. So we'll be a little less technical than one of the prior presentations, but this is done with computers and satellites, and these images can be near real time with little or no lag, depending on the frequency of the satellite imagery. This is an excellent example as to how computer vision has replaced and disrupted the prior human role of monitoring crude globally. Alice managers can use this computer imagery as inputs for trading crude and related securities. Slide 4, retail. Will a company meet, beat, or miss expectations? Again, when I was a portfolio manager, we used to hire firms to do checks, including counting cars in parking lots or shoppers in stores or malls. They would do this with a team of people around the country. What you see here is many of those people disintermediated by satellite imagery. Disintermediation of roles formerly held by people by artificial intelligence will, in our view, be a challenging material issue for the entire world to deal with, though that is beyond the scope of this discussion on computer vision. It is something I'm discussing with the World Economic Forum. They have a similar view. The large gray box, back to this slide, the large gray box area is a big box retailer. You can think of it as Walmart, Kmart, or a similar competitor. The turquoise circles represent shoppers' vehicles or potential shoppers' vehicles. Again, depending on the periodicity of the satellite photos, one can get this information on a near constantly updated basis. With enough historic data, Alice managers may use this data to determine whether store traffic and sales, which are likely a derivative of that, are likely to meet, beat, or miss versus market expectations, and invest or divest in the retailer's securities accordingly. As imagery, granularity, and periodicity of imagery further improve, imagine computer vision being able to not only count cars in parking lots, but people entering stores for an even more precise forecast of business, revenues, profitability, and security prices. For those employed in that role, they too would eventually likely be disintermediated by computer vision. Slide 5, weather. Can we use it to forecast commodity prices? This slide shows some computer-generated weather charts. There are two very large data providers of weather in Europe and the US. We will preface this by stating that weather forecasting is still far from infallible. However, some Alice managers have PhDs in meteorology and unrelated fields, but ones that are accustomed to analyzing highly dimensional data sets with low signal-to-noise ratios. They may monitor the weather at what were previously inconceivable levels of granularity and frequency. Whereas public forecasts may have certain biases that are not unintentional. For example, the probabilities of rain are generally understated so as to not depress the populace. These Alice managers, that's true by the way, these Alice managers may correct for those. They also may be forecasting for different periods. In addition, they may combine these forecasts with other satellite imagery and computer vision data. For example, let us say one is trading energy futures. If one uses satellite imagery to determine that there is a massive snow cover on the solar panels in a certain region, that may diminish the output of solar energy and result in higher prices for fossil fuels. In addition, one may use satellite imagery to discern equipment failures on wind-driven turbines, which may similarly have an adverse impact on supply of that alternative power source and resultant impact on pricing of other power sources. Again, fossil fuels, for example. Consequently, These Alice managers may be able to predict commodity yields and prices ranging from agricultural to energy more accurately than previously possible or based on public weather forecasts. This record level of data and imagery is unprecedented and a boon to Alice managers' data arsenals to potentially generate outsized returns and alpha. Slide 6, sports images. Can we use them in betting? Though I personally prefer art and the Frick to sports in Madison Square Garden, it's nonetheless worth citing this example. Though sports betting is only currently legal on a limited basis in the US, the Supreme Court is currently reevaluating that. In addition, there are Alice funds in Europe where it is legal, sports betting that is, and they are using machine learning and computer imagery to generate returns in alpha. These Alice managers are not expressing personal preferences. Rather, they are systematically using machine learning, data science, and record low processing and storage costs to try to gain an edge in which teams are likely to win and which teams are likely to lose, and similarly with players, and where the odds are mispriced, just as an investor might do the same to invest in companies and commodities. The upper image shows two monitors. Again, interesting that there are two monitors per Emily's slide earlier this afternoon. From a company's neural network analyzing an archived sports game, which even I can infer is soccer, or football as the rest of the world calls it. The lower image is based on an MIT Sloan School research paper on using 3D body images for analysis. To summarize from the aerial view, so in the center of the slide, the three photos of the hardwood floor with the commensurate blue and green circles, it appears that it is a high percentage shot opportunity. Note, sorry, we'll skip that. However, from the 3D body imagery analysis in the bottom three photos, so these, they reveal that the shooter has been rendered off balance due to a poorly placed pass, and therefore the probability is lower than the aerial view imagery would indicate. As stated, we know an Alice manager in Europe using this very type of imagery with neural networks and other machine learning techniques to invest on or bet on sports games with the goal of achieving excess returns. As cloud computing-driven processing and storage rates continue to decline materially, the analysis through computer vision of the vast trove of sports games may provide Alice managers with a material advantage in betting or investing in athletes and sports teams. Oops, sorry. Slide 7, heart rates. Do they indicate prevarication? Through supervised learning and off-the-shelf web cameras, it is possible to estimate heart rates from facial videos. This reminds me of an encounter with my 8-year-old daughter last week when I showed her a camera, still digital, though not the Canon AE1 single lens reflex I still have that used film, an even more novel concept to her, using film in a camera. And regarding the digital camera, she asked, "How do you take a selfie?" To which I explained, technology, so it's a digital camera from, within the last decade. To which I explained technology was so much more expensive that it wasn't viable to include 2 sets of lenses and flashes to accomplish that then. This anecdote is relevant because digital technology, resolution, and cost continue to improve, and this will in turn further the ability to use computer vision in Alice. Further declines in storage will similarly facilitate the usage of video, which is immensely more data consumptive than photographs. In any case, I digressed, so back to this. Back to heart rate detection with facial recognition software. The theory, science, and technology behind this is quite complicated and beyond what we have time for. We will therefore highlight we'll hit on the highlights. The photographs across the top of the slides are viewers watching different emotional content. So those. Similarly, the photographs in the center indicate the same person with different facial expressions, again, due to different content. Imagine that was the CEO of a company on an earnings call. The chart below shows an estimated heart rate based on the supervised learning technique. If that were the CEO of a company reporting earnings on a videocast, as Alice managers could theoretically use systematically, that imagery-based forecast heart rate to determine if the CEO was prevaricating, and that might have implications on the veracity of the CEO's statements and result in buy, sell, or hold recommendations on the company. Right. It's funny. It's true, though. This could conceivably be used by an Alice manager to generate returns. Again, with further diminished cloud-driven processing and storage costs, an Alice manager could not only analyze the current imagery, but compare it to prior imagery of the same person for greater accuracy and context. So, for example, if that were the CEO, one could look back at the prior years or decades of earnings calls and see where it indicated that the person was prevaricating, the person was or wasn't. Recurring patterns of honesty or dishonesty may be picked up on. And again, there are broader implications of this in society. Right. Slide 8, the equation that is Alice. So Alice is the synergy or intersection of the circles in the Venn diagram. So again, hearkening back to Emily's comments on circles and the nature of this concept, conference or symposium, excuse me. So Alice is the synergy or intersection of the circles in the Venn diagram on this page of the man or woman, the machine, the data science, the exponential growth of data, and low-cost computing. It's already reliant on computer vision, Alice that is, but over time, as previously inconceivable and undiscovered techniques are developed, these will provide fertile areas for research and development and future investment. We believe we are only in the first innings of transforming unstructured data into profitable investment signals, alphas, and returns. For example, presently, though two-dimensional imagery is being used by Alice managers, and though we highlighted a couple of three-dimensional imagery examples, 3D usage is still relatively nascent. Currently, some Alice managers are using social media such as Twitter and textual news data to invest. It makes perfect sense in the future for Alice managers to similarly use 3D, video newscasts, and other third-party video data, such as from YouTube or other third-party websites, to learn and invest based on the visual culture of our society. And again, this would all be done with machine learning. Through computer vision, an Alice manager may observe systematically that a certain financial forecaster has a consistently high hit rate of successful investing, and another has a consistently low hit rate of successful investing. The Alice system could systematically invest in the former recommendations and bet against the later's recommendations. That said, processing and storage costs need to fall further concomitantly with improved technology for image data to be even more valuable in driving Alice managers' returns. As more capital and consequently research and development is invested in image recognition technology, it will become more valuable to Alice managers and further reshape the investment landscape. We would note that as with all data usage, Alice managers must ensure that they behave responsibly and have a right to collect the data and use it with respect for people's personal rights and digital privacy. Over time, we believe the usage of 3D imagery will no longer be optional, but will be compulsory for those Alice managers looking to generate top decile returns. We believe that Alice and its prospective usage of visual imagery will disrupt investment management while providing Alice investors, such as corporate and public pensioners and endowments and foundations like the one we were at today, with the potential for world-class returns. These pension, endowment, and foundation investors would also likely benefit from Alice being a low-cost competitor versus non-Alice managers due to the greater efficiency and with the cost savings passed on to investors that would in turn help improve returns. Though that is the end of my formal presentation, I'd like to thank Emily Spratt, Louisa Wood-Ruby, and the rest of the Frick Research Department for including me in this cutting-edge, thought-leading symposium at one of the world's preeminent museums and research facilities. Thank you.